Welcome to Single Again. Now what? Our weekly uplifting show to support you, make you laugh, or just be the thing you need to hear at this time in your life. And now, here's Joanie Winberg and Steve Peck.
Hello, hello, hello. Once again from the Motor City, home of the Detroit Tigers. It's Steve Peck on this end, and on the other end from Boston is my rival. It's Joanie Winberg with the Boston Red Sox. How are you, Joanie Winberg?
I'm doing fine. It is exciting, though. I love it. I love it.
It's amazing what baseball playoffs and the World Series do to a city. It completely lifts them up. And in Detroit, oh my God, do we need lifting up.
They do.
But it seems like a great series so far, and well-matched, well-pitched, and it really seems like we both have a bunch of good guys on our team from all the interviews I've seen.
Oh, it's phenomenal. It really is. And considering the Red Sox last year had such a tough year, they were in the cellar. They were literally the last team to finish. So you can see what coaching can certainly do for a team, and here they are in the playoffs. So
right. So we're right in the middle right now. We don't know how it's going to turn out, but
well, let's hope that we win tonight, the Red Sox, and come back to Boston and win in Boston. So I think that's the perfect plan.
So you want to win, and you want us to come back and win in Boston? Is that what you said?
No.
You want us? Yeah, all right. I got you. We're going to win in Boston. Hey, listen, today we've got a great program. We're going to share with you 5 simple habits that will help bring out the best in your relationship. And Elliott Connie is our guest. He's a solution-focused therapist and author of The Solution-Focused Marriage. He's based out of Texas and provides seminars and training sessions throughout the United States and all over the world, in fact. He's helping couples build more satisfying relationships. Elliott, welcome to Single Again. Now what on DivorceSource Radio? How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you very much for having me, guys.
And welcome, Elliott. Great to have you here.
I got a hold of your book, The Solution-Focused Marriage, and I really loved it. And as you know, Single Again Now, it is a program we do on DivorceSource Radio that kind of speaks to people who have recently been through a divorce. Maybe they've been through a divorce years ago, like Joanie, or maybe it's someone that's just broken up from a relationship, and we're hoping they get back in the saddle and get back to healthier relationships. So when we talk about your book, I know it's titled The Solution-Focused Marriage, but we'll kind of gear it towards relationships because it's all pretty much the same, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Coupleship is coupleship, really.
What is a solution-focused therapist?
Well, a solution-focused therapist is a therapist that utilizes something called solution-focused brief therapy in their practice. Now, traditional psychotherapy is, what we would call problem-focused, where you're interested in the problem, the origins of the problem, how intense the problem is, how often the problem occurs, what the consequences are of the problem's presence, that sort of thing. And that's traditional psychotherapy. Going back hundreds of years, that's what people have been doing, and that's what that is. But solution-focused brief therapy is actually something totally, completely different. It's developed by a team of people in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, most predominantly Steve DeShazer and Insoo Kimberg. And what they began to do, it was in the late 70s and 80s, what they began to do was instead of focusing on the problem, focus on the goal. So instead of focusing what brought people into therapy, they developed a form of therapy about what will bring people out of therapy.
That's excellent. Excellent.
Yes. So it's all about hope and what your skill sets and talents are and how you can utilize those to defeat the problem as opposed to trying to gain an understanding of the problem.
And see, Elliott, what I'm hearing is that, usually, and this is what I saw even going through my own process years ago, that the family counselor kept pulling me into the past. And I kept saying, what are the skills and what's going on? Help me move into the future. So I can see that we are really on the same page because that's what I do with our boot camps to help people move forward. So this is refreshing and exciting to hear.
Yeah, that's absolutely wonderful. The best analogy that I give people, like when you get into a cab, when you're in Boston and you hail a cab, the cab driver is inevitably going to ask you, where would you like to go? Now, if the cab driver said to you, "Where would you like to go?" you absolutely wouldn't say anywhere but here, right? That doesn't give the cab driver any data. So when you go see a therapist and the therapist says, in essence, "Where would you like to go?" you shouldn't say to the therapist, "Not depressed," right? Because that doesn't give the therapist any data.
Yes.
We have to be able to replace that with, "What would you like instead? And how would you like your life to look?" Or you shouldn't say to the therapist, like, "What would you like from being in my office?" You shouldn't say to the therapist, "Not headed towards divorce." We have to replace that with, "Well, where would you rather be heading towards?" And that's where the idea behind the solution-focused marriage came, because there are habits associated with people building relationships that move in a very different direction.
Is it on the same idea? I always hear people say, I can't. And I always tell them, flip it and say, how can you make this happen?
Well, people say we can't because either we didn't notice we've already been doing it,
Yes.
or we didn't realize we had the skill to actually do the thing. Like, people say I can't in my office quite frequently. The most common one is people say, me and my husband, we just can't communicate. But I always tell them, well, that just means you haven't noticed you're already doing it. And a great example is, if you can't communicate, then that would make the process of selecting a marriage counselor, agreeing on the time for the session, and then subsequently showing up at the same time an impossibility. So you clearly can communicate because you did it to make this very appointment occur.
What happens over the years? Because when we meet someone new, we're all excited, we're communicating well, everything's firing. And then a few years pass and we lose all of that. What's going on?
Well, it's because we tend to be, as human beings, we're highly aware when something is not going well. We have conversations. We're attentive to it. So we say to our partners, like, I've noticed something's not going well. We need to sit down and talk and figure it out. The problem is we don't do the equal and opposite reaction. Like, we don't say, hey, I've noticed things going really, really well. Let's sit down and figure out how we're doing it. And if we did that, then when a problem popped up, we would be very aware of our skills. We'd be very aware of how to mitigate that problem and use our skills to conquer it on command. But relationships start off so euphoric and wonderful, and
right.
My uniqueness blends with your uniqueness, and it's great, and we don't focus.
Right, that's the lust stage. So what I'm hearing is that you're saying, instead of focusing on what's not working, let's focus on what we are doing well and what is working.
Absolutely.
Yes, right. That to me is the whole philosophy of life, is that when I'm talking with my clients and they keep telling me all the negative stuff going on in their life, I actually thank them and say, thank you so much for sharing with me everything that's going wrong in your life. We kind of got that out of the way now. So let's focus on what's working. And they look at me, or they just tend to say, what? So I think it's also, people are conditioned to think that way, don't you say? Wouldn't you say?
Oh, I absolutely agree. Mm-hmm. I absolutely believe that we are conditioned to think that way.
Well, so if you're conditioned to think that way, you're raised with a lot of these relationship problems that maybe you grew up around. So with this therapy of solution-focused therapy, how do you not address what happened to you years ago that may have now been carried into your relationship?
Be conscious.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, be conscious that you are doing that to begin with, but go ahead. I want to hear your answer.
You just practice, because it just makes more sense. I've been teaching this approach for years, and not one person. I've been teaching this approach for years and practicing this approach for equally as long. No client has ever said, in all of the years I've been doing this, I want to go back to focusing on the problem. And no student that I've ever taught has ever said, okay, go back to teaching me about the problem, because it's just logical and it makes sense. If we want to get from point A to point B, we should probably start by figuring out what point B looks like. And that makes sense in every other area of life. But when we encounter problems in our relationships, our brains tell us to think backwards. If we want to get from point A to point B, we should try to figure out what's wrong with point A. And that makes no logical sense when you say it that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And do you think people have to be conscious, though, enough to come to that point? And that's where I see lacking, or people are so ingrained into their beliefs. And I think one of the biggest culprits that I see in relationship is the ego. And people with egos, let's think about that for a minute. How are you going to help them change if first of all they believe that their way, it's my way or the highway, the rules don't apply to me, they need to have control. And then if they don't have control, they get out of control. And I've worked with many of these people. The ones that are conscious will say, help me soften my edges. I'm turning people off around me. But those others with massive egos, there's no way communicating with them. And you must see this too, Elliott, that there's always one with a big ego in a relationship somewhere.
I would agree, but there's a lot of factors and variables that go into like what causes people to kind of have some of the problems that we have, and what causes relationships to kind of get off track and those sorts of things. But in my experience, that really becomes irrelevant quite quickly, because when you're focusing on to go back to using the point A, point B reference, when you're focusing on point B in so much detail, then the problems that created point A become totally irrelevant, because the skills you use to build point B are completely unrelated to the flaws you used to create point A. So we're going to spend all of our time building B. We're not going to do anything else. So your ego really becomes irrelevant because it's not related to point B. And I know when you came into the relationship, even if you were the most maniacal, egotistical person, you have the ability to put it aside and build a relationship, because your partner wouldn't have fallen madly in love with you if you didn't in the beginning of the relationship.
Even if I was so handsome, they just couldn't resist me?
Even if so handsome, sir.
Oh, my.
So this is good, Elliott. I like it, because you're saying let's not focus on other things. Let's just focus on the positive end result of what we want this to be like.
Absolutely, yes. And recognize we have the ability to do it, and we've already proven it, or else the relationship wouldn't be at a point where you could be seeking a counselor.
All right. So let's walk through some of this and help our listeners right now who are single again, whether they've just broken up from a relationship or gone through a divorce. You mentioned in your book that you need to set a goal for the relationship. Why don't you talk about that?
Yes. We need, just like in every other area of our life, we need to kind of know where we're headed. Like if two people meet in college and one of them has desires of ultimately becoming a college professor, meaning that they have to be kind of portable, ready to move to any college that will hire them, and the other one wants to stay living in Dallas, Texas, we need to be aware of what we're building, so that we're not accidentally ending up in a situation later on in life where we're resentful. So if someone does get a job at Boston University, and they move from Dallas, Boston is another planet compared to Dallas. And that person's going to go there because they love you, but they're going to go with resentment and anger and frustration and all that stuff that's going to pop up later as a problem. So we need to be aware of what the goal is. What are we constructing together? And we have to have conversations about it.
And this is all aspects of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. How many kids do we want? Do we want to retire in our 40s and tour the country, traveling and, following around some band? Or do we want to work until we're 90? And do we want to invest in a family? Like, what are we building? What are we constructing? Are we savers? Are we spenders? Are we travelers? We have to be aware of that.
And Ellie, do you find that it's also, would this be good for someone before they get married, because they might not be on the same page, and find out that, there's too many deal breakers here and we really don't have that much in common? But you're saying these are for people that are already married and maybe they've lost sight of their goals together.
No, I think what I meant by the solution-focused marriage is this is how to build one.
Okay.
So, yes, this is absolutely for people in the very early stages of a couple. Like, you should be talking. And by the way, we do this naturally. On a first date, that's what we do. We say stuff like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? I'm simply saying, don't stop doing that.
Sounds good.
It just amazes me, though, Elliott, how many people don't. I can remember being at a restaurant, and my server was like 21 years old, and she was getting married, all excited about it. And she mentioned that she was Catholic, and her soon-to-be husband went to the priest, and the priest in the Catholic faith asks questions. And she said, oh, my God, it was so difficult. Those questions, we didn't agree on a lot of them. And I said, well, is that an eye-opener for you? He's just like, no, I love them. So they want to just brush that away, but these are really important, aren't they?
These are hugely important because if we accidentally, and by the way, this accident happens frequently, if we accidentally build a relationship that is incongruent with our partner, then it's going to pop up later as jealousy, envy, resentment, so on and so on and so on.
Mm-hmm. Ellie, do you find that this is the norm? I think Steve brought out an excellent point. We have the rose-colored glasses on, and we're in the lust stage, and we don't want to say things to upset the other person, or we want them to like us, and we do those things, like Steve is saying, and we're maybe not really wanting to speak the truth of what our plans are. Do you think that's common, and that's where the trouble starts?
Oh, I absolutely agree that that's common. I think that's where the trouble starts, and I think it has many different looks to it. Like sometimes, I find you so attractive that I'm willing to it's not terribly important that you smoke. You're so my type that it's not really important that you smoke. Well, 11 years later, when, bodies change and we age and, maybe the guy is balding and gaining weight or the woman is gaining weight, whatever, all of a sudden that negative is now standing taller than the positive used to. So we have to be willing to say, I want to build a relationship with someone who doesn't smoke.
Right.
I want to build a relationship with someone who's interested in traveling or who does not want kids or who does want kids or who does want 5 kids or whatever. We've got to be aware of it. We've got to honor what we notice.
I'm curious about why that shift happens, though. Why we allow all of that in initially, but then 5 years later we wake up and go, no, I don't want that anymore.
It happens there's just there's a whole slew of reasons that it happens. But as a clinician, what's important to know is, number one, it just happens frequently enough that it happens. And number two, it can be remedied just by having conversations about goals. I had a client recently who married a guy who she was very aware of some of his flaws that to her were prominent and in certain cases criminal. But the reason she married him is because her younger sister got married and she was jealous that her younger sister was married. So she was going to overlook his flaw so that she didn't want to be the only one in the family that was single.
That is, yes. And that's so many, people get caught up in that. And, oh my gosh, and that's why there's problems to begin with. So they're really not, a lot of these situations happening is because they're not healthy relationships to begin with.
Right. And here's another thing that concerns us here at DivorceSource Radio is that you've got a lot of couples that were married for years and they get married again. And guess what? They're in the same type of situation as they were with the last marriage. Then they're divorced a second time. So we don't seem to be learning the lessons. We don't seem to be doing the work. We continue to make the same mistakes over and over again.
Well, as human beings, that's why I titled my book Habits. As human beings, I just don't know why we do some of the things we do. Like, you guys are going to get me on 8 soapboxes. I don't know why we do the things we do. I could tell you as much as you need to hear that hamburgers and french fries cause heart attacks, and people are still going to eat them. You're not going to cause that. You're not going to scare people into having a six-pack. What we have to do is learn the habit of exercise and implement it in our life daily, and then you will have a six-pack. And relationships are the same. I can scare you to death about divorce rates and bad habits all I want, but I'm not going to move you into a healthy relationship. In order for me to do that, I have to somehow cause you to learn healthy habits and implement them in your life daily. And then you'll have a healthy relationship. You almost have no choice but to.
But they also have to be, again, I'm going back, they have to be conscious and they have to want to do that. I mean, I have clients call and say, you know what, I'm not ready. And then they'll call me back 3 months later and say I'm ready. But I also, even with clients that I have, I find that some take it really serious, are willing to do the work, do the homework. Others show up either late or forget to call or didn't do homework. So, the conversation is, how serious are you committed to making these changes?
Right. And what do you do if one partner is willing to commit and do this and the other is not?
One of the most beautiful things about the solution-focused approach is I'm going to treat every single couple as if they're highly motivated. because something brought them into my office. So if I talk to the 99% of them that's doubtful and hesitant and unwilling, then I'm going to cause them to become more doubtful, hesitant, and unwilling. But if I talk to the 1% of them that's thinking, you know what, if this works, then I'm going to cause that part to grow, and I'm going to experience that growth, even as a clinician, having this client begin to work harder for me.
I think it's great. I think it's awesome. Do you find sometimes when you're working with a couple that one is more excited to grow than the other? Or to
almost 100% of the time. I mean, usually it does occur, but it's rare that both members of the couple come in and they've heard about my work or my books or seen me deliver a lecture or something like that, and they're both just really excited to be there. But most often, one person has said to the other, "We're going to this counselor, or the relationship's over," and the other person's unhappy to be there.
Yes.
But they still chose to come. And it's just like a dentist's office. I hate going to the dentist. If I go to the dentist and I'm sitting in the seat clenching my chair, white-knuckling my chair and squirming, and the dentist calls me unmotivated, I would be offended because I came. It's just a difficult process. So treat me as a motivated person and honor the fact that I came and I'm here willing to go through it. Ignore the fact that I'm going through it clenching because that's a reasonable response.
That's good.
Great analogy.
And hopefully that other person will kind of get the wake-up call and realize that this is going to work, or that we have a future and we do have to put time into it. Hopefully they'll connect. I think it's great.
Right, so we need to move ahead here because we got a lot of points to cover. All right, so we know that we need to set a goal for the relationship. We need to talk. We need to really find out what each other wants in this new relationship. But then you talk about recalling your honeymoon phase. And when we say the word honeymoon, we kind of think of marriage. But what would that mean in a new relationship?
Well, what it really, and beyond recalling it, is we have to take credit for it. Most often a relationship gets started, and because it's so euphoric and so wonderful and so nice, that we don't notice that we're actually working to build something nice. We think like Cupid shot us in the heart, or we woke up on the right side of the bed, or we just randomly selected each other. But the truth is, my unique talent blended with this person's unique talent to create a relationship. And we have to take credit for the fact that we actually do work well together. Because once we take credit for those skills, then we gain mastery of them. There's that old Maya Angelou quote, when we know better, we do better. Well, in building relationships, we typically don't pay attention to what makes us successful, so we can't later utilize it on purpose because we don't have mastery of it. So this process is about gaining mastery over the things that cause you guys to be a wonderful couple.
And then we move on to communicating about the progress.
Yes. So as we are making progress towards our goal and utilizing our strengths to do so, we should have commentary. We should have dialogue and conversations about what each partner is doing that the other partner is enjoying and how we know we're progressing towards something positive. We should have these check-ins. And I said earlier that no partner in the history of ever has ever said, hey, I really need to talk to you. And then when they sit down and have the talk, I just think you're doing a wonderful job and here's why. Mm-hmm. But that's exactly what we need to do so that we're always aware that not only am I glad I made this choice for you as a partner, but I think you're doing a pretty good job and what we're building is still in line with what we always wanted to build.
I get that. It comes naturally, I think, initially in the first year perhaps. But as years go on, what does that mean? Does that mean I come home and I remind my girlfriend or my spouse that how beautiful she is and how nice it is for her to listen to me and things like that?
Absolutely. It means that I come home after 10 years of a relationship, 18 months of a relationship, and I say, you're still good at being my partner. And in the beginning of our relationship, you were good at being my partner because we had the same hobbies. But now we've been together a little longer, and we've got 2 kids, 1 infant child. And we don't utilize those hobbies as often, but you're still good at being my partner because we work really well to build the type of child that we're both comfortable with. So we feel good about this partnership. We feel good about this coupleship.
It's really treating people the way you want to be treated.
Yes, like those very basic, like kindergarten ideals, right? Like those things matter.
Absolutely. And it's the same thing how we treat our children. I cringe when I'm in a grocery store and I hear a parent call their child, "Oh, you're so stupid." I want to go over to that parent and just kind of strangle them and thinking, "Wake up here. What are you saying? And how many times do you say this to this kid on a daily basis?" And if we say this to our spouses, partners, and say, we both are different. We and it's okay. We're both unique, but yet I admire you for that, and I'm glad you're part of this relationship. And thank you for helping me because you're my strengths where that might be my weakness. So you're really focusing on their good stuff. Would you say?
Right. Absolutely.
But yet I keep hearing the Supreme song in my head.
Baby, baby, where did our love go? Ooh, don't you want me, baby? Don't you want me no more? Ooh, baby.
I mean, it was there. She used to look at me a certain way. She's so loved everything I did. Everything was funny. I was attentive. And now when I do the exact same thing, it appears she's looking at me differently.
It's literally because we're not attending to it. And I'll give you a really good example. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, Franklin to be specific, and it is one of the most picturesque places to be in the fall right now. There is nothing like what Massachusetts looks like in the fall. It is the most beautiful place I've ever seen. And I can tell you, I didn't notice that at all until I moved. When I came to Texas, there are no more hills. There are no more leaves changing color. There's no more briskness in the air. There's no more, when I saw the leaves changing color as a kid, I didn't notice the beauty. All I noticed was I was going to have to do a lot of raking soon. Well, in relationships, that happens. Like I roll over and look at your beautiful face every day, and eventually I forget that it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And we have to focus on it, attend to it, talk about it. Mm-hmm. In my area of Massachusetts, in Franklin, people would literally come there and take pictures for postcards. And I wish the 12-year-old version of myself had walked up to one of those people and said, "Why are you doing this?" Because they would have explained to me the whole world doesn't look like that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that at the time.
Mm-hmm. And do you think over the years, and I think this is something Steve's talking about, is that people take for granted those things, like looking at someone's face every day and doesn't appreciate that.
They think you're so irreplaceable. I mean, or so replaceable.
Yeah. And
it happens in all relationships. Well, not all, but the ones that break up. That's what happens, that you become replaceable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We actually begin to think that the stool can stand if I remove that third leg. I can go find another third leg if necessary. And that's not true.
And people
will fall every time.
People seem to focus more on the quirks than on the good stuff. They forget all about the good stuff. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, Steve. What country was it? China? That they had people write love letters to themselves when they got married. And then 7 years later, they would then mail them to the people to remind them of how much they loved each other and what they saw in each other, all the beauty that they saw in each other, to remind them 7 years later when that was the peak, generally starts the peak of divorce. So I thought that this to me reminds me of that, to help not take it for granted, all the beauty that we had at one time.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, Elliott, Connie, are you suggesting that the grass isn't always greener on the other side then?
Not only am I suggesting that the grass isn't greener on the other side, I'm suggesting that your grass is made of platinum and gold and diamonds, and you should notice it.
Love it.
You talk about continue to date when you're in a relationship, and this is kind of awkward for me a little bit. I get the concept of continuing to date, but especially if you find yourself with someone that has younger kids now, it's even more important that you date because they're so busy with the kids that they have to create a night to go out. But isn't that a little contrived?
It's funny that you say that because, every marriage counselor in the world is going to tell you that one of the best things you can do for your relationship is continue to date. But I don't mean it in that sense, to be honest. What I mean is dating as a mindset. When you begin to date, when every detail of the date is planned out and thought about for the purposes of putting a smile on the other person's face. So when you're going on, dates 1, 2, 3, that sort of thing, you're going to put on, like, I know she likes blue, so I'm going to wear a blue sweater. Or I know he likes black, so I'm going to wear this black skirt. So you have this mindset of honoring the wishes and desires of your partner. But somehow over the course of time, we become much more selfish. And I'm advocating that we continue to honor the wishes and desires of our partner by doing things that contribute to their happiness. So I don't mean dating as an action. I mean dating as a mindset.
That's great.
I do like that. It's kind of like you'll talk to someone that's been in a relationship for a long time, and you ask, well, do you ever do special things for your partner? Just out of the blue, you're at the store, you see something they like, even though it's $2. It's the thought that counts. And a lot of times they go, no, I don't do that. I mean, they don't do anything for me. Why should I do anything for them? And I've tried to suggest that if you do that, if you give love and attention, that it has to come back, doesn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, if I stand in front of a fan and I throw something on it, then that fan is going to inevitably shoot back the material I threw on it. So it would behoove me to throw things that I want to splash back at me. And that's the way life works. Life is going to splash back onto you what you throw at it.
Right. It's actually the law of attraction. What you think about, you bring about, and who you are is what you attract. So, and people have to really be aware of that. If they're negative and grouchy and selfish and Mr. Ego, so to speak, all of a sudden be aware of the people that you attract, and that versus if you're giving love, you're going to receive love. That's a universal law.
Absolutely, and it's not violatable. That law will be consistent all the time.
It is. It's been around forever.
And not by accident. There's a reason for this.
Yes. And it's amazing. I'll say to people, when you're in that mindset of high energy, did you ever notice that all of a sudden the right people show up in your life, the right situations happen, you receive the right phone call, you're not swimming upstream, things just flow, and they're like, yeah. And I say, well, think about that mindset you were in that day. And they'll say, you know what, I was really in a good mood. And I said, and that's what you were attracting. And I said, then think of another day that you were negative, finding fault, blaming other people for your problems, whining, whatever, and think about, did you feel like you were stuck in the muck all day? And they'll say, yeah, exactly. So you're right on there, Elliott, right on.
It's funny that you say that. Like, if you read my book, I tell this story in my book. I won't go into detail here, probably because for time reasons more than anything else. But the day I decided to change my life, I met my wife 3 hours later.
Oh, love it. And what did you change about yourself?
Yeah, I want to hear the story now. You started it.
Well, I had a very difficult childhood, and lots of things were difficult with my parenting and things like that. And it caused problems going into my early adult years, 17, 18, 19, 20, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I was in college, and I was sitting in my dorm room, and I thought to myself, like, I've been trying to be happy my entire life by literally trying to, overcome this anxiety and depression that's been troubling me forever. And I think I've been looking in the wrong place. So from now on, instead of trying to overcome this issue, I'm going to try to be the best person I can every day. And I'm going to see what that does. I'm literally thinking this in my head. I'm going to try to be the nicest, best person I can. If someone needs money, I'll loan it to them. If someone needs a pencil in class, I'll give it to them. I'm going to try to be the best, nicest person I can be, and just see if that has an impact on this anxiety and this depression. And 3 hours later, I met my wife. I met the woman that would later become my wife.
I love it.
Wow.
To me, it's so powerful. It is so powerful, and it really works. It really works.
How long
before that was the last day I had depression or anxiety. And I'm 37.
And you didn't need and you didn't need any more medication if you were taking it.
Love is the drug.
Exactly. The day before that was the last time I had any of those issues.
That is awesome. And how long have you been married now?
I've been married now 8 years this past April.
Wait, that's awesome.
Awesome.
Wonderful lady.
A wonderful lady, of course, and you sound like an amazing guy, too. So, two very lucky people, and a lot of hope for our listeners that they, too, can find someone again.
Absolutely.
Because I'll tell you what, it's a different world when you get into your 40s and 50s. Maybe you've been married for 10 or 20 years, and now you find yourself in a position to date. I can tell you that when you go out there, it's a whole different ballgame than meeting someone when you were in your 20s or 30s, when you're just flying by the seat of your pants and you're going for the love. Now, you've got things in your mind that you really want or really don't want. And you don't want to go in any direction that doesn't take you there.
Exactly. And what's funny is people are always saying, like, I've been through a divorce and I'm finally ready to start dating again. And I feel kind of lucky because I know what I don't want. I know what I want. But in addition to that stuff, I also want you to be aware of what habits do you need to have to continue a happy relationship going forward. And to start off immediately makes it wonderful. I mean, it makes it great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So then we're in this relationship, and you want us to function as a partnership.
Absolutely. I can't remember who was one of the two of you was talking about ego early on.
I deal with a lot of people with egos. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about your ego, Joanie.
I don't have one.
We all have one.
Yeah, and in relationships sometimes, like we'll go into that second relationship, and I'm good with money. And I've always managed my money in the first relationship. So in spite of you being better at money, I'm just more comfortable with me doing it. And in a partnership, we really have to take what's good about me and mix it with what's good about you and put ego aside. Like, for example, in my house and in Texas, this is, just this, what I'm about to say just sounds crazy. But in my house, I'm much more detail-oriented than my wife, and I'm much more organized than my wife. So I do the housekeeping. Now, if I were to say, like, this is traditionally not a man's role and she should do it, then I'm not applying my skill to the relationship to overcome one of my wife's flaws. And my wife uses her skills, in my house it happens to be money management, and she maintains the money in our house. Now, both of our egos could cause us to reverse that.
Absolutely.
But we are just applying our skills to the relationship, and that's it. So it functions as a true partnership.
And also, Ellie, just a little bit that I've talked with you here, you just seem like you're a down-to-earth guy, and your ego is in check. I mean, and like I said, I deal with so many, and I have to say it's mostly the men with the big ego stuff here. There are some women, but it's the big ego guys. And, I always just like to have people, what are the signs? And maybe, we can talk about that later. But, to me, you're conscious and you've got a good heart, and it's not about you. And that's where you're already ready at the starting gate to move forward. But what about the person that can't even get there?
Well, I think we can all get there. I mean, in essence, one of the reasons why very successful people have egos is because they know their strategies work. So if I know I've used my skills to build a multi-billion-dollar company, and then I come home and you tell me to do something different, I'm likely to think, well, no, I'm really successful all day long. You should follow my instructions. But we really have to put that aside and only think about what do you do and bring it to the table, and how I mix it with what I do and bring it to the table, and then it works. It's like Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. Yeah. Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen for the Chicago Bulls won championships, not because they were good players, but because Michael Jordan said, I'll score all the points, and Scottie Pippen said, I'll grab all the rebounds and play the defense.
Yeah, and that's a team, but that's where the egos are removed. And this could be another whole show, but there's people that aren't conscious enough to even go there.
That's true. But, I mean, we're making ego out to be a horrible green-eyed monster, and ego's not bad. Ego's good. It's what makes a lot of things happen. And if you think that Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan had no ego issues beyond what they did on the court, I would disagree.
It's in check.
No, I definitely think they had egos. Yeah. But when they stepped on the court, Scottie Pippen didn't say, I'm jealous, I want to score a bunch of points. And Michael Jordan didn't say, I'm jealous, I want more rebounds. They were okay with each other doing their talent.
They were in check, and it was in control.
Well, compare that to Kobe and Shaq.
And they had a divorce.
That's right.
So their egos got in the way,
right,
and they had to separate.
And that's where it's hard if a person says, if I don't get my way, then I'm going to, and I see these signs all the time when people are in ego and they can't let that go. What are the signs where they can be, sarcastic, they're insulting, they're vindictive, they're, and I see that in many, many relationships, or they're even to a point where they lose, they don't have control, they lose control. And that is very common. But Elliott, what I love is that there's hope for those kind of people. And what you're offering here is that there's hope for these people.
Yes, there's absolutely hope.
And that's what I like about it, is because generally, I do a lot with corporate work, and that personality, it is difficult to deal with. And generally, because I do a lot with personalities, and that dominant, demanding doer, there's always one in a relationship, and they are great. They are fabulous leaders who are great at the bottom line, but are very difficult people to deal with. And but I love what you're saying, because, as I said before, there's hope.
Yeah, but is it really fair to say that men are the ones with all of the ego problems? I mean, women have ego too.
I hear you. Yes.
I mean, tell an adolescent that he hasn't figured out the world, and he's going to look at you like you're crazy. She's going to look at you like you're nuts.
Yes.
Like, we have ego at a very early age, and both genders do.
Yeah. It is, I have to say, from my experience of what I've seen out there in the divorces, it's been more prominent men. And a couple of times I've had couples where the woman is very strong and powerful, wants the control. And the husband just finally said to her, or the ex-to-be, he said, just kind of give me a sign here. Are you on a mission or are you angry? Because I can't tell the difference. And so she really started to check in with herself of how her tone, her behavior, that personality has a very difficult time and has to be aware of their tone.
Right.
And so for me, it's great if they can just become conscious, because they are fabulous people. They have so much to offer. They have the natural leadership ability. But heck, if people are running away from you and don't want to deal with you, you've lost that. So I just love, like I said, that you're giving them something to focus on, and hopefully the ego will subside.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree with you that it's predominantly men, because in men, strong ego is rewarded, and in women, it does not be.
Yes.
Although, when you take a look at a home that's run for the most part by the mother, they get used to directing their children to do whatever needs to be done. You do this. You put your clothes back. And sometimes when the husband comes home, he's treated almost like the kid. They're so used to delivering orders that, you're just another order.
Absolutely, and that's why I think your point is actually quite true, that ego exists in both, and we really just have to put it aside and just ask the very basic question: what do you do well?
That's right.
What do I do well? And let's blend that.
Meet in the middle. I was actually working with a couple one time, and the man was like yourself, very organized and loved it. And he had the laundry room immaculate. The cupboards were perfect in organization with the soups and everything else. And the wife could have cared less. And she said, if that makes you feel good and you're great at that, then knock yourself out, because I hate that. And she said, go for it. And he had a blast. He loved it. And she honored him for that. She didn't make fun of him or anything like that. She just said, you know what, good for you. If you don't mind, I don't like it. So go ahead and do it. Have fun. So I think it's like you said, you're honoring each other's strengths.
God forbid she would have liked it. How many men have a choice over how they design their home? Women compromise with, all right, look, here's your room. You do whatever you want here, but not in the rest of my house. That happens.
I mean, traditionally and frequently that happens. You're absolutely correct. But again, if one of you is better at decorating than the other,
that's
right.
right.
We have to bring our talents to the table, and we have to work together.
Right.
And that's what a partnership does.
I love it, Elliott.
The definition of partnership.
So how do you compromise if you don't work together? If she's got her ideas how the room should look and you have your ideas?
But see, I think partnership and compromising are two completely different activities. So if I compromise, then inevitably that means one person is giving something up. And in a relationship, it's got to be win-win. So if I say, what's your decorative style? And you tell me, I don't know, modern deco, and you say, what's your decorative style, classical? The question isn't, we need to give something up to meet in the middle. The question is, how do we blend them?
Yeah, and how do you?
With practice.
Good job.
It's not something we do. It's not something we do with intention. It's actually something we do very naturally.
So you've got to keep that line of communication always open. But guys, what we're talking about guys a little bit, we have a tendency to, when we get angry, to just clam up and ice our partner out of the situation. How do you, as a woman, draw a man out of that if that's where he's going?
Well, if we have a constant line of communication open that's about positive data, then that line of communication never gets closed and the clamming up never occurs. Mm-hmm. We don't clam up with anybody ever that we think is going to say complimentary, praising things. We only clam up because we're afraid the conversation is going to turn negative, and that's a self-defense mechanism. So if we get in the habit of saying, I think you're doing a good job, then we don't clam up. We don't back down from those conversations. And that's the key, is we have to have conversations that are actually inviting for participation.
Elliott, do you believe in the sandwich approach that you probably have heard, or the Oreo approach, where you approach someone with a compliment or something that they're doing great, and then you say something like, you know, this is how it comes across to me, this is how I'm feeling, but I really appreciate what you're doing?
Right. No, I don't agree with the sandwich approach because that makes it too like a technique-ish.
Boy, I agree with that so much because I hear when somebody does that, I know what they're doing.
What I believe in is like the true meaning behind the sandwich approach.
Okay.
That quite honestly, your positive activities absolutely mean more to me than your flaws. And the sandwich approach kind of indicates that, like, I'm tricking you into thinking that that's true.
True.
But I mean, like, I really believe that you are more wonderful than you are not wonderful. Now, I also have to acknowledge that you're not perfect, so we do need to do some work on the imperfect stuff. But I honestly believe that the perfect part of you is more important than the imperfect part of you, and that's what we have to get back to.
Awesome book, Elliott. How do... well, you're in Texas, so I know you have clients there, but do you also speak with people via Skype around the country?
I do speak with people via Skype if necessary. My practice is located in Keller, Texas, which is kind of in the midpoint between Dallas and Fort Worth. People can contact me via the phone or Skype or email if necessary.
All right. And his website is ElliottSpeaks.com. Definitely go there. This book is so amazing, and it's a very easy read. I read it in an afternoon, and it's great. It's what you need. We're out there trying to get healthy relationships once again. So thank you, Elliott Connie, for being a guest on Single Again. Now what?
No problem. Thank you so much. It was so wonderful to have it. And I will say that they can get the book at all major booksellers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, the Nook. It's available for all those places.
Elliott, it was a total pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was nice to talk to a Bostonian.
Hey, wait a minute. Now, come on.
So, Red Sox.
Don't forget about us and the D here.
You know, I gotta say I love talking to people in Detroit too. One of my dreams is to watch a home game at Ford Field. So hopefully one day I get to do that.
Well, when you come here, you make sure you look me up, and I'll see if I can make that dream a reality. Hey, Joanie, why don't you throw out your contact information, too, while we're at it?
Absolutely. And what we're really excited about is we have the boot camps coming up called the Survive and Thrive After Divorce Boot Camps. And it's all about dealing with the holidays and how to bring in the new year with a smile. So a lot of great skills and tools that you will learn to prepare you to deal with the holidays and for the new year. And go to freshstartafterdivorce.com.
Is there one for men, too, or is there just that one?
For men and women. In fact, the men next week is... Tuesday, October 22nd, and then women is Wednesday, October 23rd. But I have ongoing boot camps all the time.
All right, so check out that site. And if you'd like to write us a comment or question, address your email to DivorceSourceRadio@gmail.com. Great show today, Joanie. Thanks again, Elliott.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.